everyone, so I've got the day off today and I thought I would film a video, and this is one that I've been meaning to do for absolutely ages. It's one that I promised you guys and Tommy that I would do. Tommy was a tortoise that came to live with us a little while back. You can check out my video Hello and Goodbye Tommy if you want to know a bit more information about it. But basically he came to live with us from my friend's boyfriend's parents. They had him and they weren't caring for him right, and she recognised that there was something wrong, although she doesn't know a huge amount about tortoises, so she didn't realise how bad it was, but she knew that he wasn't a normal tortoise. So basically, after months of trying to persuade them, they handed him over to us, and he was in such a state. And as much as we tried to do everything we could, we took him to a reptile specialist, and we were planning on treating him quite aggressively, and we were going to get him better. In the end, he ended up having to be put to sleep. So basically, I thought I would do a lot of research into metabolic bone disease and make a video. So then hopefully it will prevent a couple of tortoises ending up with this horrible thing, because even if it saves another tortoise's life, then at least he hasn't died for nothing. So still quite emotional, even though we had him for probably a week. It wasn't long that we had him, but it was still so upsetting. So yeah, moving on. Metabolic bone disease, it is a kind of umbrella term for a load of different diseases that cause abnormal bone growth, bone repair, softness or deformities of the shell, and also the skeletal system as well. So the most common is nutritional secondary hyperparathyroidism, I believe you pronounce it, or NSH, which is also called soft shell. And it's caused by a combination of generally too little calcium, too much phosphorus, or too little vitamin D. It's almost entirely caused by poor diet and husbandry, and can be prevented completely just by providing the tortoise with the proper care and diet for that species. Now, I get quite a lot of comments which scare me a little bit from people who say, "Hello, I've got a tortoise. What species is it?" That's not good, really. If you have a tortoise, you need to know what species it is, because all species will require slightly different care needs, and some of them are quite extreme differences. Tortoises can originate from everywhere all over the world. Some tortoises will be from like tropical areas, and they'll eat bugs and slugs, and they'll be omnivorous, whereas some tortoises will originate from dry, arid areas of the world and will be complete herbivores. So if you don't know what species your tortoise is, how can you know you're providing the right care? They'll come from different temperatures, different humidities. So Sheldon, for example, who is just having a soak down there he's got a big, has a big Tupperware tub which I soak her in to keep her hydrated. So she's having a little bath down there. But she was captive bred, but she would have originated from Macedonia. And she is a Hermann's tortoise, which is a Mediterranean species. So she originates from a fairly dry kind of area, and she is completely a herbivore. So she requires very little protein in her diet. So yeah, you need to know what species you have so you provide them the right care. The best place to start is an appropriate diet with the right levels of calcium and phosphorus. I do have a diet video on my channel, which I'll probably link in the description bar if I remember, but that is specifically for Mediterranean species. So Hermann's, Horsfields, my brain's gone blank. So yeah, you do need to know what type of tortoise it is before you can start looking at care. And please, 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 if you're thinking about getting a tortoise, do your research first, because they're quite a complicated animal. You need really specific care requirements to prevent things like this from happening, basically. So Tommy's owners didn't do the right research, and kind of that's what happened. So please do your research. Yeah, tortoises also need the correct warmth, lighting, plenty of exercise, they need rest, they need an assortment of other vitamins and minerals, but basically just good care and diet. So some of the causes of metabolic bone disease are too little calcium or too much phosphorus in the diet, the presence of substances in the diet that impair the absorption of calcium, a vitamin D3 efficiency, which can be caused from incorrect exposure to UVB lights, either from a bulb in their tortoise enclosure or from being outside unfiltered natural sunlight. Also, inadequate or excessive levels of protein in the diet. And again, this depends completely on the species. Sheldon needs quite a low level of protein in the diet, but some other tropical species may need higher levels. So again, it depends on that species. Some other underlying conditions can cause metabolic bone disease, such as kidney or liver disease, because it impairs the conversion of vitamin D to its active form. Small intestinal disease or parasites, which again disrupts the absorption. Disease of the thyroid or parathyroid glands, which produce hormones and affects calcium metabolism. But these are all minor contributors. Most cases of metabolic bone disease are nutritionally based. Also, improper basking temperatures if it's too cool, because this can impair the digestion and therefore calcium absorption, because it inhibits the production of vitamin D3 from the UV light. Basically, tortoises, when they're basking, will absorb light and heat through their shell. The heat will help them digest the food, and the vitamin D3 enables them to use the calcium that they ingest. So it's a bit complicated, but you just need their lighting and their heat to be right. So it's important to be aware that a lot of basking bulbs that are available in most pet shops in reptile sections are only basking bulbs which only emit heat. They don't emit any UV rays. So you really, really need to be careful which one you're buying, because a lot of people just buy the basking bulb and think that's everything sorted. Now you can get mercury vapor bulbs, which are combined heat and UV in one bulb, which are quite good for tortoise tables with the one light fitting. But if you've got a really big indoor enclosure, you might want to use one of the strip lights, because that will kind of cover a larger area. But yeah, either you can do separate heat and UV bulbs, or you can do the combined mercury vapor bulb. But you need to make sure that you look into kind of the temperatures and what UVB output it is, and you need to have a cool area and a basking area with the right levels. Again, I've got a video called Setting Up a Mediterranean Tortoise Enclosure, which talks about heating and what temperatures to have it at, but that's again only for Mediterranean species. Humidity is also important. Some tortoises are going to need a really humid environment. So yeah, natural sunlight is better than bulbs if you can provide it. If you live in a climate that allows for it and it's a sunny day, then put them outside so they can have a munch on any weeds in your garden, providing you haven't fertilised or chemically sprayed your garden at all. Then put them outside so they can have a wander around, they can soak up some natural sunlight. The bulbs that you can buy don't properly recreate this. Mercury vapor bulbs are really good, and they've got the spectrum as close as they can get it, and it is very close, but nothing quite is as good as being outside. So now I'm going to talk about the clinical symptoms of metabolic bone disease. A lot of these we saw when Tommy came to live with us. I'll insert some clips if I can, because it was very obvious with him that something was really, really wrong. So the first thing that we noticed was really weak limbs and the inability for him to raise his plastron off the floor. I've got a tortoise anatomy video as well, which might be useful if you're getting a bit confused with the terminology that I'm using, like scoots and plastron and stuff. But the bottom, his underside, basically, he couldn't lift up. He didn't have the strength in his limbs. Also a depressed carpus, so it made him look a bit hunched backed. Also, the whole carpus may be flattened rather than domed. Pyramiding of the scoots, which are these little sections, the segments of the shell, and these, if they're kind of like pyramids, then you know that something is wrong. Also, the shell appearing too small for its body, so the shell can be like too far back. It was only slightly looked like this in Tommy really, but I've seen some horrible photos on Google. If you typed in metabolic bone disease in tortoises, you can see some really bad cases. Also, the soft shell, which was really obvious in Tommy. It was the first thing that you noticed when you picked him up. He was really squishy, and you would leave little indents in his shell where you'd picked him up, even though I was really super careful. When tortoises' shells are made of keratin, which is the same thing as like hair and fingernails, and they should be pretty solid. They're like a living thing, they grow, but I mean, they shouldn't be squishy. Sheldon's is quite hard, isn't it? Yeah, it should not be squishy. That's a really bad sign. Oh, but it's actually really important to note that some species of tortoises do have soft, leathery or rubbery shells, like pancake tortoises or soft shell turtles. I think that's a thing. So again, really look into the species. I don't want to freak you out if you've got like a pancake tortoise and now you're really scared. So again, this is tailored more towards Mediterranean species because I couldn't, I haven't done a huge amount of research in every species of tortoise because they're quite different, and tortoises, there's a vast topic really. So an abnormal beak is also a sign. So it can often end up looking like a parrot's beak. Now this was definitely the case in Tommy. I'll see if I can zoom in actually and show you Sheldon's beak. Sheldon is a really good tortoise, and trying to work out the new camera. There, I think you can kind of see from that. So this is Sheldon, who is absolutely gorgeous. Sheldon is really good actually at munching on cuttlefish, and he rips and tears at natural plants and stuff all day because he's got a really natural diet filled with lots of fresh fibrous foods. So he's actually really good at keeping his beak trimmed. I know it can be difficult with some tortoises who aren't so good with keeping their beaks down, but it can become really, again, I'll see if I can insert a picture, but really overgrown. Can't it? So some tortoises I know do have to have their beaks trimmed, and this is something that we were going to do with Tommy, but there we are. So that's kind of a normal healthy tortoise beak. So it's much more of a little nose than a parrot's beak. So yeah, got distracted. Also, bowed or deformed legs is obviously not a good sign. Any kind of deformities. Anorexia, which we saw in Tommy, he hadn't eaten for about a month before he came to live with us. And then when he was living with us, he refused to eat as well, didn't he? So yeah, tortoises shouldn't be going a long time without eating. It can be a sign that something is very wrong, as it can be with any animal. So what we were going to do with Tommy was actually get a feeding tube inserted. So also lethargy, or just them being not moving, just kind of sitting around, is not normal. Tortoises should be really active. They should. They've kind of got this rep of being really slow and boring animals, but they should actually be really active, and I don't know, they're not boring, are you? You're not boring. Also, constipation isn't normal. I've done a video again on tortoises peeing and pooping, which is great. One of my favourite topics, pee and poo, isn't it? So I do have that video that you can go and check out if you would like. Oops. Which gives you a bit more information about like how regularly they should be going and the consistency and stuff like that. It's not just their shell that's affected, it also affects their skeleton, their muscles, it affects all parts of them. So you might think, oh, they've just got a bit of a squishy shell, but it's what's going on underneath as well. Although luckily some of the internal stuff can be a bit delayed because the tortoise basically prioritises saving their insides over their shell. So they want to protect their nervous system and the skeleton, so the shell is normally the first thing that will get affected, but other stuff will be going on under the surface. So again, don't want to be freaking people out for no reason. Very young tortoises, like hatchlings, can be a bit soft or flexible, which just enables them to fit in the egg. This often worries people, but there is a difference between a young shell and a soft shell. Young tortoises are like springy, but soft shells are a bit more like leathery rather than springy, and they don't resist as much to being squished. So, but if you're worried, of course, try and take your tortoise to a reptile specialist. Reptile specialists are going to be way better than like a normal vet, because vets already have to know so much about cats, dogs, rabbits, like all of these different types of animals. So realistically, they're probably not going to be the most knowledgeable about exotic pets like tortoises. So if you can get them to a specialist, it is definitely worth the extra time and money. I took Tommy to a reptile specialist and she is absolutely fab. She really knew her stuff, and it puts you so much more at ease when you know someone really knows what they're doing. And then even though Tommy didn't make it, I know that we gave him the absolute best chance that we could. If you are worried about your tortoise, then please take them to the vets. But with young tortoises, it should firm up over time. If it gets softer rather than harder, then it's probably that something's wrong and you should take action. So the treatment and prevention. Metabolic bone disease is far easier to prevent than treat. Some of the important issues are dietary calcium, like I mentioned earlier. The best source of calcium is a varied diet. For Mediterranean species, this is a diet of fresh edible weeds, flowers and grasses. Try and avoid that pellet food stuff because it's not natural. It's just kind of processed rubbish. It's not going to have the fibre content that they need. It's going to have like unnecessary like sugars and stuff. So try and avoid that. Again, my diet video explains more why. So it's often recommended that foods should be dusted with like a phosphorus-free calcium powder, which helps supplement their diet and gets those levels right. Because where they come from in the wild, or where Sheldon would originate from, the soil would be much richer in calcium, so the plants that grew would contain higher levels of calcium. So it's just trying to get the diet as natural as possible by supplementing it. So a lot of people think, well, I'm putting supplements on, that's not natural, but it's trying to recreate what their diet would be naturally. So yeah, be careful though with the dusting, because too much calcium can be damaging as well. So bone is made up of a variety of minerals, including magnesium and boron, and calcium powders don't provide this, so you might want to provide a cuttlefish, which I do in my tortoise enclosure, which is high in calcium and all the necessary trace minerals. It also helps prevent their beak from becoming overgrown, which I mentioned earlier. So that is a really good thing that I do recommend. You can find that in most pet shops in the bird section, or you can find it online. I've bought mine in Wilkinson's in the pet section for about 50p a cuttlefish, and it lasts absolutely ages with Sheldon gnawing on it even though he loves it. So also a low dietary phosphorus, again, is getting those levels right, and the right protein content. Like I said earlier, Sheldon needs quite a low protein diet to prevent developmental issues such as pyramiding. However, protein is essential for muscle growth, so you don't want a completely protein-free diet. Also, young active animals will require a bit more than older inactive tortoises. So also high fibre, exercise, the correct lighting, which I went into earlier, a quality UVB bulb, or daily access to unfiltered sunlight is essential, although I would recommend both. A lot of people contact me and they say, oh, my tortoise goes outside every day, is it okay not to have lighting? I would still personally, if they're being kept indoors in a tortoise table, I would personally still do both. Sheldon gets outside when it's nice weather, when it's warm and sunny, like t-shirt weather. Then she goes outside to try and soak up as much natural sun as possible. But when she can't go outside, she's got her tortoise table with her lights. And again, the proper temperature. So these areas of their care are absolutely essential for the prevention of metabolic bone disease and can be a critical part of the treatment. A tortoise will never recover from metabolic bone disease if their care isn't right. You can give them the best medicine and treatment in the world, but if the underlying causes haven't been addressed, then there's absolutely no way they're going to get better. She's getting grouchy now. I'm going to put her outside in a second because it's nice weather. The right diet is critical to the health of the tortoise. In general, you want a diet that's high in calcium, high in fibre, low in phosphorus, and adequate in protein. But again, this varies between species. A tortoise also needs the proper environment. Without it, the perfect diet can result in metabolic bone disease. They need that light and heating to be able to convert all the stuff you feed them into useful stuff. Some other critical factors are moisture levels and UVB, but too much can be harmful. So you need to get the balance and you need a gradient, which is why I always recommend a tortoise table over a vivarium, especially for metabolic Mediterranean tortoises. Again, my enclosure video talks about why, but you need that gradient between the basking area and then their cool area so they can regulate their temperature. Tortoises need to be able to regulate their body temperature as well as their UV exposure, so they need areas without and as much as they need areas with. This is the same for moisture, which is why an open-topped table is always better than a vivarium in my opinion, especially for tortoises that don't need a humid environment. Too much humidity for her would cause like shell rot and a load of other things, which would not be good. It allows the airflow as well and doesn't trap in the heat. Yes, they also need air circulation to prevent like runny nose syndrome and respiratory issues. But in general, just research your species and know that the environment you're housing them in is right for that species. So now I'm going to talk about the treatment of metabolic bone disease. Okay. So as long as the tortoise is still eating and the shell's not too soft and there are no other scary symptoms, you can usually treat them at home. With Tommy, we needed to take him to see a specialist because he wasn't eating at all and his shell was so bad. I mean, when you picked him up, the plastron would kind of droop. It was really, really, really severe. I was treating him at home as well, best I could. Hello, hey. It's a bit scratchy with the nails, you're a bit scratchy. Yeah, it was really scary. I was doing some hydrotherapy with him to try and strengthen up his legs and all this sort of thing, but he needed to see a specialist. But it's important not to panic and start dumping loads of calcium into their diet and flooding them with UVB lighting. You just need to alter the habitat, the temperatures, the humidity and the lighting. You can alter it so it's right straight away, but if they've gone from no UVB light to just 24 hours a day UVB, that's no good either. You need to just alter it so it's correct and add in more calcium-rich foods and small amounts of extra calcium to the diet. You can also add a pinch of multivitamins once a week to ensure that they're getting all the trace elements that they need. Make sure they're exposed to good UVB lighting, whether it's natural, unfiltered sunlight or a good UVB bulb. Currently, mercury vapour bulbs that emit UVB seem to be the most sun-like option. They've got the biggest spectrum and the closest to sunlight rather than the strip tube light things. But it can also be paired with a cool white fluorescent bulb to make it more of a balanced colour spectrum. If the shell is really soft and the tortoise isn't eating and is showing other symptoms, you need to see a reptile specialist. The vet should do blood tests and other x-rays and try and complete a history to determine whether the problem is nutritional secondary hyperparathyroidism or whether it's another type of metabolic bone disease or whether there's any underlying health conditions which would affect the tortoise's ability to recover, so they can determine the best course of treatment. When we took Tommy in, we had to do blood tests and everything because we didn't know basically if any of his organs had shut down. He was really, really dehydrated because he basically hadn't drunk for months because he couldn't move and they hadn't soaked him or anything. So he was really, really dehydrated. So you don't know whether, his kidneys have failed or anything like that. So obviously if he was in kidney failure, then there's kind of no sense treating him, because it would just be, he was so bad that it would just have been basically prolonging his suffering. So yeah, it's usually treated with vitamin D3 injections, which Tommy had, and oral calcium supplements. And in more severe cases, they may also need dietary support and other treatments. So some will need feeding tubes inserted if they've become anorexic and are refusing to eat. So yeah, tortoises can fully recover from metabolic bone disease. It's not all doom and gloom if you sort it out. They can recover. Some will, have remaining skeletal or shell deformities, and there may be some residual muscle or nerve problems, but the earlier it's caught, the better the chances for a full recovery. But yeah, they can make a full recovery and live really long, happy lives if it's sorted out. So it's not all doom and gloom if you go and get it sorted out really quickly. But yeah, please take something from the video that I've made you today. I really hope that it has helped someone. We all make mistakes, so please don't feel like I'm attacking. Oopsie. Please don't feel like I'm attacking the way you care for your animals. We all have made mistakes, but it's really, really important to go off and do your own research, especially the information that like pet shops give you. You can't rely on that. You do need to go off and do some research of your own. For Mediterranean species, especially the Tortoise Trust, I really, really recommend. They're absolutely fabulous, and they have some amazing, amazing care sheets for all different types of Mediterranean tortoises. They do other tortoises as well, but not all of them, I don't think. But yeah, they're my go-to place. Also, the Tortoise Table has a really good plant database where you can type in any plants, and it comes up with whether it can be fed to them, how much you can feed them, and all that sort of thing if you're unsure of what you can feed. Right, I'm going to stop blabbering now, and I'm going to go. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys soon. I will be back doing more tortoise videos. I will. It's just they take quite a lot of information. I just got pooed on. Thanks, Sheldon. Great. They just take loads and loads of research and checking that I'm putting out the right information, because I don't want to give you guys any wrong information. I just got pooed on in my hand. It's really gross. Sheldon, I'm going to go and clean my hand very thoroughly, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for watching.